During dinner, my daughter-in-law suddenly blurted out, "Just act like you care about the old hag, her inheritance is on the way." I simply straightened my dress and smiled. That Monday, I made the announcement, I had donated every cent of the $9 million. I'm so glad you're here. Follow my journey to the very end, and let me know which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. I've always believed that family gatherings should feel like comforting hugs, not carefully staged performances. But that Sunday evening changed everything I thought I understood, about family, about love, and about the people I'd given my whole heart to for decades. The night had started pleasantly enough. My son, Michael, had called earlier in the week to invite me over for a special dinner. No occasion, he'd said with a forced cheer I'd learned to recognize but had always chosen to overlook. At 55, I treasured these invitations, rare as they had become. I'd spent the afternoon baking my signature apple pie, Michael's favorite since he was a little boy. As I pulled into their driveway, I couldn't help but notice Kiara's sleek luxury SUV parked front and center, while my modest sedan would be left out on the street. A small thing, perhaps, but one that quietly captured my place in their world. "Mom, you're here," Michael greeted me with a brief kiss on the cheek, already taking the pie from my hands before I'd even stepped fully inside. "Kiara's just finishing up in the kitchen." Their home always struck me as something out of a magazine, spotless, stylish, and oddly cold, despite the elegant furniture and polished decor. Photos of Michael and Kiara adorned nearly every wall. Only one tiny picture of me with my grandchildren sat off to the side, half hidden on a shelf where no one was likely to look. "Grandma." Emma and Liam came rushing in, wrapping their little arms around me. Their joyful squeals were the purest comfort I'd felt in weeks. I knelt to hug them, my knees protesting, but I didn't care. "I've missed you both so much," I whispered, breathing them in, committing their warmth to memory. It had been almost a month since I was last allowed to see them, even though I lived just 20 minutes away. "Careful kids, don't wrinkle Grandma's dress," Kiara's voice sliced through the moment as she appeared from the kitchen, dressed in an outfit that likely cost more than my monthly pension. She didn't offer a hug. Not even a smile. Just a cool nod. "Dinner's almost done." The meal played out like a performance. Smiles without warmth, conversation without substance. Kiara dominated the table talk, going on about their vacation to the Maldives, the elite school they were considering for Emma, the exclusive country club they'd finally joined. Michael would glance at me now and then with what felt like guilt in his eyes, but he never redirected the conversation or tried to include me. As dinner wound down, I excused myself to use the restroom. The downstairs one was under renovation. Another of Kiara's endless projects, so I made my way upstairs. That's when I heard them. Their voices floated up from the kitchen, just loud enough to be understood. "I don't know why we have to keep doing this every month," Kiara said sharply. "She barely notices anything anyway." "She's my mother," Michael replied, but it sounded rehearsed. Hollow. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. "Finch que gosta de velha bruxa. A haranca tache gondo. Pretend to like the old witch. The inheritance is coming." They didn't know I spoke Portuguese, a language I'd picked up decades ago for a job I once loved. I clutched my chest, as if I could somehow hold my heart together with my hands. And the worst part? Michael didn't deny it. He didn't stop her. He just lowered his voice and said, "Keep it down." His silence confirmed everything. Somehow, I found the strength to pull myself together. I adjusted my blue dress, the same one Kiara had once complimented, which I had worn hoping to spark some connection, and returned to the dining room with a smile that felt like glass. "That was a lovely meal," I said evenly. "But I think I'll head home. I'm feeling a little off tonight." "Are you sure?" Michael asked, though his eyes gave away his relief. "We haven't even had your pie yet." "You can enjoy it tomorrow," I replied, grabbing my purse. "I've been nursing a headache all day." Kiara didn't look up from her phone. "Feel better, Agatha." The drive home passed in a blur. Tears threatened, but I held them back like a seasoned warrior. By the time I parked in my driveway, a strange calm had come over me. Inside my modest but cozy home, paid for with decades of hard work and resilience, I sank into my favorite chair and finally let the truth settle in. My son and his wife were simply biding their time, waiting for me to die so they could claim what they saw as theirs. The monthly dinners, the occasional phone calls, the carefully measured politeness. It was all a performance, one with a $9 million payoff. That's what my financial advisor had recently confirmed. My estate, built from years of sacrifice, was worth nearly $9 million. Smart investments. The eventual sale of my late husband's business. But to Michael, it wasn't a life's work, it was a prize. A jackpot he felt entitled to. Never mind the mother who had held him through ear infections, heartbreaks, and growing pains. Who worked double shifts, saved every penny, and built a future from scratch to put him through college. When the first tear finally fell, I reached for my phone. I opened my calendar. There it was, already set. A routine check-in with my attorney on Monday morning. What had once been just another item on my to-do list suddenly felt like fate. That night, I went to bed with my thoughts churning, but my heart steady. By morning, I was clear on what had to happen. They wanted my money. They were about to learn how dangerous it is to assume. Sleep escaped me. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Kiera's voice again. Just pretend to like the old hag. The inheritance is almost here. Worse was Michael's silence. His refusal to defend me cut deeper than any insult. Lying there, I found myself swept away by memories, some comforting, others now laced with a sharp new edge. I remembered the day Robert died. 27 years ago, and yet I could still feel the heat of the sun and the coldness of Michael's hand in mine at the funeral. He was only 8. "It's just us now, buddy," I'd whispered, trying to sound brave. "But we're going to be okay." Robert had left behind little more than a small insurance policy and a drowning construction supply business. Friends and family suggested I sell what was left and find a man to help raise my son. It was 1996, but their advice felt like it belonged in the 1950s. I ignored them. Instead, I dug in. I taught myself everything I could: contracts, budgets, software, negotiating deals, all at the kitchen table after Michael had gone to sleep. I made mistakes, yes. But I learned fast. There were missed school plays. Parent-teacher meetings I couldn't attend. Nights when I tucked Michael in late and mornings when I was already gone for deliveries. "It's for us," I'd tell him. "I'm building something better." He'd nod, those serious eyes so much like his father's. But I saw the disappointment, even then. The business survived. Then it grew. Eventually, I expanded into real estate development. I had an eye for potential, and I took risks that paid off. By the time Michael was ready for college, my company, Westfield Developments, was thriving. He never lacked for anything. Top-tier schools. Summer programs. A new car at 16. His dream university, paid in full, no loans, no financial strain. All the things I never had. "You're spoiling him," my sister Jean once warned. "He needs to learn the value of hard work." "He sees me working enough for both of us," I told her. "I want him to have more than I did." Now, lying there in the dark, I wondered if she'd been right. I remembered the day Michael introduced Kiera. She was stunning, polished, obviously raised in a life of privilege: designer clothes, prep school polish, summer trips to Europe. She complimented my home, my meals, but there was something distant about her kindness. A calculation behind her charm. But Michael was smitten. "Isn't she incredible, Mom?" he asked, eyes glowing. Who was I to doubt his happiness? Their wedding was lavish. Kiera's parents pitched in, but I insisted on covering most of the expenses. "You've worked hard enough," Michael had said when he half-heartedly offered to chip in. "This is my gift to you both," I replied. Kiera had hugged me at the reception. "You're the mother I never had," she whispered. I believed her. Wanted to believe her. Even though she turned immediately afterward to charm one of the wealthier guests. After the wedding, the calls grew infrequent. The visits were sparse. Invitations came only for holidays and birthdays. One time, I dropped by unannounced. Michael had the flu, and I brought homemade soup. Kiera answered the door, clearly irritated. "We've got it covered, Agatha," she said, not inviting me in. "Michael's resting. I'll let him know you came. When my grandchildren were born, I hoped it would change. I offered to babysit, to help, to give them some rest. There was always a reason not to. A nanny. Her mother was visiting. The babies were on a schedule I might disrupt. I remembered sitting alone 4 Christmas Eves ago. Staring at my phone. Waiting for Michael's call. They had taken the children to Aspen that year. "It's just easier this way, Mom," he said when he canceled our traditional dinner. "We'll FaceTime. I promise." The phone never rang. Instead, a text arrived the next morning. "Sorry, got wrapped up in the festivities. Merry Christmas." Attached was a photo, my grandchildren, unwrapping gifts in front of a perfectly staged tree inside what looked like a luxury chalet. And yet, I kept giving. A generous check for their 10th anniversary. Help with the down payment when they needed more space. Emma's private school tuition, labeled as a grandmother's gift, though I'd always suspected Kiera just didn't want to dip into their own savings. I rose from bed and walked quietly to my home office, switching on the lamp beside the old mahogany desk Robert and I had bought in our first year of marriage. One of the last physical reminders of the life we built together. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a leather portfolio. Inside were the documents that laid out the financial picture of my life's work. $9 million. That's what my decades of effort now added up to. The company I sold 5 years ago. The real estate ventures. The carefully chosen stocks. Neatly condensed into a figure, one that my son and his wife saw not as a legacy, but as a prize. Was that my worth to them? Not the lullabies or scraped knee bandages. Not the handwritten notes in lunchboxes or the tearful smiles on graduation day. Just a number they were quietly waiting to collect. By the time I snapped the folder shut, the sun was beginning to rise. A new day had begun, one that brought with it a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I showered and dressed with precision, slipping into a charcoal suit I usually reserved for professional meetings. My attorney's office opened at 9. I planned to be his first client through the door. As I backed out of the driveway, my phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Mom, you left kind of early last night. Everything okay?" Kiera was wondering if you could watch the kids Saturday. Her cousin's wedding doesn't allow children. I placed the phone face down in the passenger seat. For the first time in decades, Michael could wait for an answer. I had more urgent matters to address. Walter Hayes, my attorney for over 20 years, looked up in surprise as his receptionist ushered me in. "Agatha? I thought we were meeting Friday." "Something's changed, Walter," I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "I need to revise my will. Drastically. Today." His eyebrows lifted, but he nodded and reached for a legal pad. "All right. I'm listening." I took a slow breath, and began outlining the plan. A plan to deliver the most meaningful lesson on wealth my family would ever receive. When I finished, Walter leaned back, his expression cautious. "Are you absolutely sure?" I thought of Kiera's sharp words. Michael's silence. Years of trying to purchase love that should have come freely. I've never been more certain. As I stepped out of his office, the air felt different. Lighter. Like the weight I'd carried for so long had finally been moved, transferred to the updated documents now stored in his filing cabinet. The will had been changed. But my inquiry was just beginning. "Give yourself a little time before finalizing anything," Walter had advised. People sometimes act impulsively when emotions run high. But I'd stopped him. This isn't emotion. This is clarity. For the first time in years, I'm seeing things as they are. Still, I needed more than a revised will. I needed confirmation, not for legal purposes, but for peace of mind. I had to know whether my family saw me as anything more than a payday. Or if Kiara alone had poisoned the well. Over the next week, I became a quiet detective in my own life. It started with phone calls, to family members I hadn't spoken to in far too long. My niece Jessica sounded pleasantly surprised when I called. She chatted about nursing school until I casually mentioned I was reevaluating my financial arrangements. Her tone shifted immediately. Oh? What kind of changes? Just some restructuring. Nothing serious, I replied lightly. How's your mother doing? By the end of our conversation, Jessica had promised to visit soon, something she hadn't done in over a year, and had mentioned my finances 3 separate times without me offering any detail. Less than 2 hours later, my sister Jean called. Agatha, is everything all right? Jessica said you might be dealing with financial trouble? The speed at which the information traveled said everything. Everything's fine, Jean, I said calmly. Just organizing things. You know, estate planning. Well, you know we're always here for you, she said, her voice thick with a warmth I no longer trusted. Let's get together soon, it's been too long. I agreed, knowing full well Jean had cancelled the last 3 lunch dates we'd scheduled. I logged the exchange in the small leather-bound journal I'd begun keeping. The evidence was accumulating. Next, I reviewed my bank statements from the past 5 years. A pattern emerged, one I'd ignored for too long. $20,000 for their anniversary trip to Italy. $35,000 for a kitchen remodel. $15,000 toward Emma's school deposit. I'd called them gifts. But were they really? Or had they been quiet expectations, unspoken demands disguised as requests? Then there were the monthly transfers. $500 sent to Michael's account. Every month. For 3 years. It had started after he mentioned a temporary financial crunch. I'd offered it as short-term help. But the deposits had never stopped. And he had never brought them up again. No thank you. No check-in. Just, taken, as though it were his right. I called my financial advisor. Richard, has Michael ever contacted you directly? There was a pause. Yes, actually. About 6 months ago. He asked about your portfolio and retirement plans. Another pause. I assumed he had your permission. He didn't. What did you tell him? Nothing specific. I just said your holdings were substantial and that I'd need written approval to go into details. You handled it perfectly, I told him. Then I hung up and made another journal entry. Things I once brushed off as harmless now seemed disturbingly calculated. There was the time Kiara borrowed my credit card to buy emergency diapers, only to return it with over $800 in mystery charges. Or the heirloom jewelry, pieces that had supposedly been damaged during a cleaning, though some had simply vanished. Michael had become increasingly evasive about their finances, despite their obvious taste for luxury. But the most telling moment came when I cancelled Saturday's babysitting, without explanation. Michael called almost immediately. Mom, we really need you tomorrow. Kiara already bought her dress for the wedding. Sorry, Michael. Something important came up. A pause. More important than helping your family? His voice had a sharpness to it, something close to anger. Yes, I said plainly. More important. The silence on the other end said it all. No curiosity about what was going on with me. No concern. Just disappointment that I wouldn't be the free childcare provider they'd assumed I'd be. Fine, he said curtly. We'll figure something out. 3 hours later, Kiara called, her voice syrupy sweet. Agatha, darling, I hope everything's all right. Michael said you had something come up for Saturday? Just a personal matter, I answered evenly. A pause. Is there anything we can do to help? She asked. You know, if it's about the house, or any paperwork. Michael would be happy to come by. Paperwork? Yes, wills, trusts, those complicated things, she said lightly. Michael just worries you might be overwhelmed trying to manage all of it alone. There it was. Not just an assumption about inheriting my estate, but active maneuvering to ensure they got it. That's very thoughtful of you, Kiera, I said coolly. But everything's quite in order. I just met with my attorney this week, actually. Another beat of silence. Oh, was there a reason? Nothing for you to worry about, I replied, letting a quiet strength seep into my tone. Her silence told me she'd heard it. After we hung up, I sat in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, bathing the roses Robert and I had planted long ago in gold. The truth was undeniable now. My family, or at least the branch I'd invested the most time, love, and money into, didn't see me anymore. Just a future check waiting to be cashed. It should have broken me. Instead, it solidified my resolve. The steps I'd taken with Walter weren't just justified. They were necessary. That evening, I called my niece Jessica. About that visit you mentioned, I said. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? There's something important I'd like to talk to you about. She seemed surprised, but agreed quickly. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year, but I remembered she'd always been direct. Sometimes uncomfortably so. Tomorrow, I would find out if anyone in my family was truly worth keeping close. Later that night, my phone chimed. A message from Michael. Found a sitter for tomorrow. Hope everything's okay. Should we be worried? For the first time in my adult life, I left my son's message unanswered. The time for polite pretenses had passed. In just 1 week, I would gather them all and tell them what I had decided, a decision that would redefine everything about our family dynamic. I slept soundly that night, more at peace than I'd felt in years. Because the truth, however painful, was still better than the beautiful lies I'd been telling myself for decades. Lunch with Jessica turned out to be more emotional than I expected. We met at a small cafe near her nursing school. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to play the role of the doting, generous aunt. She arrived slightly breathless, scrubs barely hidden under a light jacket. Sorry, I didn't have time to change, she said, a little embarrassed. You look perfect, I assured her. And I meant it. There was something honest in her messy sincerity that felt refreshing. We chatted casually at first. But when the food came, I gently shifted the conversation. Jessica, why did you call me back so quickly after our last talk? She hesitated, fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down. Honestly, she said. Mom thought you might be having money problems. She said we should make more of an effort, just in case you needed support. She looked at me directly. But that's not what's going on, is it? No, I said quietly. Not at all. I didn't go into the details of what I'd overheard. Or the revisions to my will. But I did ask her about how the family talked about me, what they assumed, what they expected. Jessica didn't sugarcoat it. Everyone knows you've done well, Aunt Agatha. And I hate to say it, but some people act like your money is already spent. She twisted her napkin in her hands. Michael and Kiera especially. They talk about your estate at family dinners, the ones you're not invited to. The sting of that confirmation hit hard. But still, I appreciated her honesty. And you, Jessica, what is it you're hoping to get from me? Her eyes widened, then narrowed with a flicker of hurt. Nothing, she said quietly. I've got student loans and a tiny apartment, but they're mine. I don't want a handout. Not even from family. She hesitated. Is that why we haven't spent much time together? Did you think I was just after your money too? The question struck deeper than I expected. Had I been so fixated on Michael and Kiera's entitlement that I'd lumped everyone else in with them? I think. I've been blind in more ways than I care to admit, I said slowly. But I'm finally starting to see things for what they are. By the time lunch ended, I'd invited her to the family gathering I was planning for the coming weekend. Just be prepared, I told her, it might get a little uncomfortable. Family get-togethers usually are, she replied with a wry grin. But I'll be there. The next part of my plan required something I hadn't felt in a long time, boldness. That evening, I called Michael. I'm coming to your house for dinner tomorrow, I said. A reversal from our usual dynamic. It clearly threw him off. Tomorrow? Let me ask Kiara. I'm not asking, Michael, I said firmly. I'm letting you know. I'll be there at 6:30. I've cooked for you for most of your life. You can handle one dinner. He stammered out a weak confirmation. And in that moment, I felt a long-shifted balance begin to return to center. When I arrived the next evening, the tension in the air was almost visible. The house was messy, lived in, but hastily straightened. Kiara greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Agatha. What a surprise having you here with us. Is it? I said casually, handing her a bottle of wine. I thought regular family dinners were still a thing. The only genuine warmth came from the children, who were thrilled to see me again so soon. Kiara hadn't even attempted to cook. Takeout containers lined the counter. Michael, meanwhile, was visibly on edge, watching me like a lit fuse. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down deliberately. I've made a decision, I said evenly. It affects the family, and I'd like everyone to come to my home this Saturday at noon. There's something important I want to share. Kiara's expression froze. What kind of decision? One that's been a long time coming, I answered calmly. I expect all of you, Michael, the kids, Jean and her family. Jessica already knows. Michael's voice was tight. Mom, if this is about your will or... This is about family, I cut in. And what that word should mean. The rest of dinner played out in fits of awkward conversation and prolonged silences. As I was putting on my coat, Kiara pulled me aside with a smile that felt pasted on. Agatha, you know we love having you over, but springing things like this on us, it's a bit destabilizing. Are you all right? Emotionally, I mean. Women your age can struggle with balance. The condescension was astonishing. I've never been clearer, Kiara, I said without flinching. But thank you for your concern. The days leading up to Saturday passed in surprising calm. I spent them quite literally putting my life in order, clearing out closets, organizing old photos, and prepping the formal dining room I rarely used. Walter called midweek. Everything's signed and finalized, he said. The documents will arrive Friday. Still sure about all of it? More certain with every passing day, I replied. By Saturday morning, everything was ready. I'd prepared a light lunch, nothing fancy. This wasn't a party. It was an unveiling. Jean's family arrived first, her husband Tom, Jessica, and Jessica's brother Brian with his wife. They looked a bit uncertain but pleased to be included. Michael, Kiara, and the kids showed up right at noon. Kiara wore what I recognized as her serious business outfit, complete with the pearl necklace I'd given her for her 30th birthday. Once everyone had settled into the living room, I remained standing, fully aware of the weight behind what I was about to say. Thank you all for being here, I began. Lately, I found myself reflecting on what family truly means, and what kind of legacy I want to leave behind. The room fell into a heavy silence. You could practically hear the gears turning in Kiara's head, calculating. For years, I focused on building financial stability, first for Michael after his father passed, then for myself in retirement. I've been fortunate. My investments have flourished. I paused and looked directly at Kiara. Exceptionally well, in fact. Michael shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Kiara's smile tightened, turning sharp, almost predatory. But I've come to understand something, I continued. Wealth without principles isn't a blessing. It's a burden. Sometimes, even a curse. I opened the folder Walter had brought earlier and took out the documents. I've made a decision about my estate. Currently, it's valued at just under $9 million. A collective gasp rippled across the room. Even Jean, who I knew had some inkling of my financial position, seemed caught off guard by the number. As of this Monday, $6 million of that has been placed into a trust. It will fund grants and support for single parents running small businesses. Faces froze. Kiera's color drained completely. Michael opened his mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it and closed it again. The remaining $3 million, I said, will be distributed as follows. I met their eyes. Michael, Kiera, you will receive $250,000. Enough to pay off your mortgage. But not enough to maintain your lifestyle unless you earn it yourselves. Michael's voice cracked as he started to protest. Mom, you can't be serious. I raised my hand. Emma and Liam will each have $1 million placed into educational trusts, usable only for tuition and school-related expenses. Any funds left will be released to them when they turn 30. Kiera suddenly stood, her movements jerky and full of fury. This is outrageous. You can't just. I can, and I have, I said, calmly. The rest of the money will go to relatives who've shown that they value connection more than cash. I looked over at Jessica, her eyes wide with disbelief, and then back to my son and his wife. You've made it painfully clear what's most important to you. And it's not me. Michael's face was now a deep shade of red. Is this about Kiera's joke? About what she said? It was just that, a joke. The room went still as the meaning behind his words settled in. This isn't about a name, I said evenly. It's about what followed. Your silence, Michael. That spoke louder than anything she said. I placed the documents on the coffee table. The donations are already complete. This decision is final. Kiera snatched up her purse, rage practically radiating off her. Come on, Michael. We're leaving. But Michael didn't budge. For the first time in years, he was really looking at me, not through me, not past me. Something in his eyes changed. What have we done? He whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Kiera stood frozen by the door, her face twisted in disbelief and anger. The rest of the family remained still, watching the collapse of a reality they'd taken for granted. What have we done? Michael repeated, louder now. Mom, you're not really going through with this, are you? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. My voice was steady, even as emotion swirled underneath. Kiera stomped back across the room, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. This is elder abuse, she snapped, jabbing a finger at me. You're clearly not in your right mind. We'll challenge this in court. Jessica stood then, surprising everyone. Aunt Agatha seems completely sound to me, she said quietly. Maybe instead of accusing her, you should ask yourselves why she felt the need to do this. Kiera whirled on her. Stay out of this. You're just thrilled because you're getting a piece of what should have been ours. I didn't even know there was money involved until 5 minutes ago, Jessica shot back. Some of us actually care about Aunt Agatha, as a human being. Jean tried to cut in. Maybe we should all take a breath and. No, I said, holding up a hand. No more calming down. No more pretending. This family has swept far too much under the rug for far too long. I turned to Michael, who looked like the weight of the room had aged him a decade. I heard what Kiera said about me at dinner last week, I said quietly. I heard her call me a Mara, and I heard her talk about waiting for me to die. But more than that. I heard your silence. A wave of gasps and murmurs rolled through the room. 9-year-old Emma shrank back against the couch cushions, sensing the weight of what was happening, even if she didn't understand the details. It wasn't like that, Michael said, his voice shaking. She was upset. It just came out. We didn't mean. Don't lie, I cut in sharply. Not anymore. I took a breath. I've spent the last week reflecting on our relationship. The monthly checks you never acknowledged. The gifts that became expectations. The way I was slowly pushed out of your lives, except when you needed help. Kiera tried to cut in. That's not fair. We include you in everything important. Really? I said, fixing her with a look. When was the last time you invited me over, and didn't ask for money or childcare? I confronted her. Her mouth opened, then shut again, no words, no defense. The truth is, I continued, sweeping my gaze around the room, I allowed this. I enabled it. I believed I could buy my way into your lives. That if I gave enough, money, time, support, I would be seen, valued, loved. But that's not how real families work. Michael's eyes brimmed with tears. Whether they were from genuine regret or the realization of lost wealth, I couldn't say. Mom, please, he said, stepping toward me. We can fix this. We love you. Do you? I asked gently. Or do you love what I've always given you? Of course we love you, he insisted, glancing at Kiera, who sat stony-faced, unmoved. Then explain it to me, I said. Explain why you contacted my financial advisor to check on my estate value, without my permission. Explain why, the moment I set a boundary this week, whether refusing to babysit or asking for dinner at your place, you responded with irritation, not concern. He had no answer. Jean stood, clearly troubled. Agatha, while I don't condone what Kiera said, or Michael's part in it, don't you think this is a little extreme? They're still your family. Yes, I agreed, and that's exactly why I didn't leave them with nothing. The children's futures are protected. Their home can be too, if they choose to manage it wisely. But I will not bankroll a lifestyle based on waiting for me to die. Kiera's face twisted in rage. You self-righteous old. Enough, Kiera, Michael snapped, cutting her off with a sharp wave of his hand. You're only making it worse. He turned back to me, his expression shifting, there was guilt now, perhaps even a flicker of sincerity. Mom, I don't know what to say. I never meant for you to feel used. Intentions mean far less than actions, Michael, I replied. And your actions, over many years, have made it painfully clear where I rank in your life. Kiera scoffed. So that's it? You've made your decision, destroyed our future, and we're just expected to move on? Your future isn't destroyed, I said evenly. You're both healthy, educated, capable adults. If losing money you didn't earn can ruin your lives, then maybe I've failed you more than I realized. Another silence fell. At last, Tom, Jean's husband, who'd remained quiet, spoke up. Maybe we should give Agatha and Michael some space to talk this through. I shook my head. No. This needs to be heard. No more secrets. No more pretending. I walked over to where Emma and Liam were sitting, their small faces drawn tight with worry. I knelt down in front of them and gently took their hands. I want you both to know, this isn't your fault. Not even a little. I love you both very much. That's why I've made sure you'll have what you need for college, and whatever comes after. Because that's what grandmothers do, they look out for their grandchildren's future. Emma blinked back tears. Are you mad at Mommy and Daddy? I'm disappointed, I told her honestly. But that doesn't change how I feel about you. I stood again and turned back to the room. My decision is made. What happens next, that's up to each of you. Kiera snatched up her purse. Children, we're leaving. Now. Michael hesitated, torn. He looked at me, then at Kiera. Michael, she snapped. Now. With one last conflicted look in my direction, he followed her, ushering the children out. The door slammed behind them, the sound echoing through the stillness like a gavel. Jean approached me cautiously. Agatha, are you all right? I nodded, surprised by my own certainty. yes. For the first time in years, I think I truly am. Once the others left, offering hugs, reassurances, and promises to call, Jessica stayed behind, helping me clear the untouched lunch from the table. As we washed the dishes side by side, she said softly, "I'm proud of you, Aunt Agatha." That took incredible strength. Not strength, I corrected gently. Self-respect. Something I should have found a long time ago. She paused, drying a glass. What do you think will happen now? With Michael and Kiara, I mean. I considered it. I don't know, I said truthfully. That's in their hands. But whatever relationship we might have in the future, it will be built on something real. Not on dependence or expectation. Jessica nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think Michael does love you. He's just lost. Maybe, I replied. Time will tell. After Jessica left, I sat alone in the garden, the evening sky blooming in shades of pink and gold. The confrontation had been painful, yes. But it had also been liberating. The burden I'd carried for so long, finally laid down. The desperate need to be seen by people who only viewed me as a means to an end, that weight had finally been set down. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael. We need to talk. Just you and me. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed a simple reply. When you're ready to be honest, I'll be here. The future was unclear, but for once, I didn't feel afraid. I had spoken my truth. I had drawn the line. And whatever came next, I knew I would face it with the dignity I had finally reclaimed. It took 3 weeks before I heard from him again. 3 weeks of unexpected calm, broken occasionally by concerned calls from Jean or thoughtful messages from Jessica. 3 weeks of rediscovering who I was, beyond being the bank of mom. I planted a new rose garden. Joined a book club at the library. Even said yes to dinner at Walter and his wife's place, my first social evening in longer than I could remember. Life moved on. Simpler, but fuller. When Michael finally called, his voice was different. Softer. Worn down. Sincere. Can we meet? He asked. Somewhere neutral. Just us. No Kiara. We agreed on a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, claimed a quiet table in the corner, and ordered a cup of tea to steady my nerves. When he walked in, I hardly recognized him. Gone was the polished, self-assured man who'd sat in my living room weeks ago. This version of Michael looked tired. His clothes slightly wrinkled. His shoulders slumped, carrying more than just exhaustion. Mom, he said simply, sliding into the seat across from me. Michael, I replied, keeping my voice even. I waited. He stared at the table for a long time before lifting his eyes to mine. Kiara's left, he said. She's filed for divorce. Whatever I had been expecting, it wasn't that. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished for my son's marriage to fall apart. Don't be, he said with a bitter laugh. Turns out, when the money disappeared, so did her interest in being my wife. He ran a hand through his hair. She wanted me to fight the will, hire lawyers, claim you were mentally unfit. Anything to get the inheritance back. When I refused, she said I was choosing you over her and the kids. And the children? I asked, my heart tightening. We're working on custody, he said, his voice cracking slightly. She's angry, but she won't cut me, or you, off from them. In fact, she told Emma you weren't her grandmother anymore, and Emma got so upset that Kiara had to walk it back. I sipped my tea, absorbing it all. This wasn't what I had intended. Not the turmoil. Not the fallout. I never wanted to blow up your life like this, I said quietly. Michael gave a small, tired smile. Didn't you? He asked, though his tone wasn't accusing. You knew what would happen when you changed the will. I knew I was setting boundaries, I replied. I knew I was done being taken for granted. The consequences, those were yours to choose. He nodded slowly. That's fair. He paused, then added. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks. About the kind of son I've been. The kind of man I've become. And? I prompted. And I don't like who I see. He let the words sit for a moment. Somewhere along the line, I started tying my worth to things, what I owned, what I could show off. And I married someone who reinforced that idea. I stopped seeing you as a person, and started seeing you as a resource. You took me for granted, I said quietly. Yes. I remember how hard you worked after Dad died. I was proud of you. But at some point, I stopped seeing your success as something you earned, and started treating it like something I deserved. Why? I asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted me. Was I too generous? Did I make it too easy? He considered it. Maybe, a little. But that's not an excuse. I was a grown man making selfish choices. He looked directly at me. I let Kiara say horrible things about you because it was easier than confronting her. I accepted your help without so much as a thank you because it was easier than living within my means. I let us drift apart because facing it would have meant admitting how badly I'd failed. His honesty was unexpected, and strangely moving. I'm trying to be better now, he continued. I've moved into a smaller place. I'm reviewing my spending. I'm making changes. When Emma asked why we weren't living in our house anymore, I told her the truth, we were living beyond our means. And it was time to live responsibly. How did she take it? A small smile crossed his face. Better than I thought. She asked if that meant we could finally get a dog, since the old house didn't allow pets. I couldn't help but smile too, children, endlessly resilient. I don't expect forgiveness, Michael said, his voice softer again. And I don't expect you to change the will. But I do want you to know that. I get it now. And in a strange way. I'm thankful. Thankful? I echoed, surprised. This was the wake-up call I needed. I hate that it had to come this way, but I'm glad it happened before it was too late. I studied his face, watching for signs of pretense, but found none. This wasn't the rehearsed charm I'd grown used to. This was real. Unfiltered. Painful. Honest. I've missed you, I said finally. Not the version of you that showed up with an agenda, but the real you. The son who used to call just to talk. I've missed that too, he whispered. I've missed a lot. We talked for nearly 2 hours, unpacking years of unspoken hurts and misunderstandings. It was difficult. At times, deeply uncomfortable. But necessary. Like cleaning a wound so it could finally start to heal. When we stood to leave, he pulled me into a hug. Can I bring the kids to visit this weekend? No strings. No favors. Just time together. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. That Saturday, Michael arrived with Emma and Liam, both clutching handmade cards. We baked cookies, played board games, and for the first time in years, I felt like a grandmother again, not an ATM. As the weeks became months, something new began to grow between us. It wasn't perfect, there were stumbles, moments where old habits crept back in. But there was honesty now. And a mutual respect we'd never had before. Kiara stayed distant. Our only communication happened through Michael, and only regarding the children. The divorce moved forward. I never asked for details, though Jessica mentioned Kiara was already dating a wealthy real estate developer, just a month after the separation. I didn't feel bitter. Just relieved. Relieved to be out of the role I had never meant to play. Relieved to finally be living not in quiet resentment, but in hard-won peace. 6 months after what the family now simply referred to as the meeting, I invited everyone to my home for Thanksgiving. Jean came with her family, including Jessica, who proudly introduced her new boyfriend. Michael arrived with Emma and Liam, all three of them looking more at ease, more genuine, than I'd seen in years. As we gathered around the table, I glanced around at each face, familiar, imperfect, complex. But this time our bonds felt different. No longer defined by obligation or expectation, but by something deeper, sincerity. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to offer a toast." The room quieted. Glasses lifted in anticipation. "To second chances," I said. "And to the courage it takes to expect more from others, and from ourselves." "To second chances," they echoed. Later, as the night wore down and guests began to leave, Michael stayed behind to help tidy up. We worked side by side in the kitchen, the soft clinking of dishes filling the comfortable silence. "You know," he said, handing me a towel, "I think this might be the best Thanksgiving we've ever had." "Because of the food?" I teased. "Because it felt real," he said, without missing a beat. "No masks. No unspoken expectations. Just us. Messy, honest, and real." I smiled. Because he was right. The inheritance that once threatened to fracture us had, in the end, cleared the way for something far more lasting: authenticity. That night, after the house was quiet again, I sat out in the garden, bundled in a blanket against the late November chill. The stars glittered overhead, and I found myself speaking to Robert, as I often did when the world was still. "You'd be proud," I whispered. "Not of the wealth, or the success in business, but of this. Of finally having the strength to demand respect. Of choosing to be seen and valued not for what I gave, but for who I was." A gentle breeze stirred the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice in the wind. And it struck me then, some inheritances aren't counted in dollars. They live in the courage to stand firm. In the wisdom to recognize your own worth. And in the quiet peace that comes from choosing a life of integrity. That, I realized, is the legacy I want to leave behind. Not a bank account filled with money, but a story. The story of a woman who finally learned that dignity isn't a gift someone gives you, it's something you claim for yourself. That real love never comes with conditions. And that respect, once earned, is the richest inheritance of all. I had reclaimed my self-worth. And in doing so, I had discovered something far more valuable than any financial legacy. I had found myself. Now I'm wondering about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do in my shoes? Have you ever experienced something like this? Let me know in the comments. And while you're here, I'm leaving 2 of the channel's favorite stories on the final screen. They might just surprise you. Thank you for watching.